Hi, you're listening to This Is Not Your Practice Life. I'm your host, Macy Renee, and we are going on a journey together, my friends. I'm a certified life and emotional intelligence coach. And if you really want to step into your highest self, there are a few non-negotiables you're going to have to learn, and I am just the person to help you do it. No matter your past, I'm here to help you create a more fulfilling future. So stick around with me. Not only will I teach you how to navigate your brain's daily mind drama, but I'll help you actually understand your mind, your emotions, why you do the things you do, and why others do the things they do. Most importantly, I'll help you build the self-awareness skills to create whatever results you want. It's never too late to change the trajectory of your life. After all, this is not your practice life. Good morning, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. My name is Macy, and I am so thrilled that you are joining me today. If you're a brand new listener, welcome to the podcast. And if you are a returning listener, welcome back. Let's talk about worrying for false protection, okay? Maybe you do this. Maybe you don't know if you do this, but you're going to find out today. But this is the idea that you can outrun your emotions by preparing. So basically, let's say, hello, anxiety. How many of you can probably raise your hand right now and say that you are an anxious Nelly? And I'm not talking like chemical anxiety. I'm just talking about general kind of, it shows up circumstantially. It shows up a lot of the times. And you tend to have this kind of worry mentality that you need to be 10 steps ahead to prepare yourself for any sort of scenario that could go wrong, okay? And oftentimes, this anxiety is accompanied by emotions that don't feel comfortable, that you don't want to feel. But what's so interesting is that your brain thinks if it just prepares you in all the ways that you could potentially be prepared, if it thinks of all of the scenarios that could possibly happen, that somehow, some way, you can outrun those uncomfortable emotions, okay? So it's kind of this pattern or this habitual thing that happens with ending up being someone that overthinks a lot and over-prepares for everything. And if you've been this person or if you are this person, you know that it's a very exhausting place to be or a very exhausting characteristic to have. And I speak from experience that for a lot of my life, it's gotten a lot better in the recent years since like being coached and just having more awareness of my mind. But I definitely would say like I tend to worry a decent amount. And it really comes up for me like when it will result in a tragedy. So I want to give you an example of this. Back in, 2017. I talk about this on the podcast a lot, but I went to my second coaching retreat as a client for my coach. We went to Michigan, and honestly, that retreat was so life-altering for me. I got so much coaching. It was so vulnerable. It felt so gross and pukey at the time. But I swear to you that experience genuinely just kickstarted my life into a completely different direction. And I got coached on a lot of different things over the course of, I think, 3 to 4 days. I can't remember exactly how long I was there, but really deep coaching on a lot of things. And one of the things I remember coming up to me was this fear of losing my opa. My opa was my great-grandpa, and I was really, really close to my great-grandparents. So I lost my opa in 2017. I lost my oma, my great-grandmother, in 2019. And so I went to this retreat in, it would have been June, I guess early June I think it was early June of 2017. And I got coaching on the fact that I was so distraught at the idea of losing my opa. And a part of the worry was that certain family members were going to absolutely fall apart. Now, I was a newbie to coaching. I had not even had coaching at this time for a year. So I was very much still learning mindset. I was still learning emotions. I was still a little like baby learning all of the things that coaching could teach me. And I showed up to this retreat full of anxiety because I just anticipated that my OPUS time was coming to an end and I was going to have to be the strong one. Now, this was a story for me most of my life. I have to be the strong one. I can't allow myself to break down. I can't allow myself to cry. I can't allow myself to fall apart because there are family members, even if they're older than me, even if they should be the person ideally comforting me, I have been the person that comforts them because they don't have the emotional strength to do it. And they haven't done any of their own introspective work. And if I fall apart, everybody's going to fall apart. So I have to be strong. This was the story. I imagine that there is someone out there right now listening that feels like you have to be the rock, that you cannot crumble, that people are looking up to you and people are depending on you and relying on you to be strong. Okay. And it's a very, very hard story to carry. I carried it for a long time. I don't believe it now. Sometimes there's little glimmers where it wants to show up and I feel like I have to be super strong. But for the most part, thank God, 8 years later, seven and a half or so years later, I have released myself from this story. But at the time, it felt so big and so heavy and so true. It felt like 40,000 pounds were on each shoulder. So I showed up for coaching because I really wanted to release myself of this story, but I didn't know how. And I will never forget one of the things that my coach said to me. And it genuinely, it hit me in the moment, but I think it's one of those things where you hear it and you're like, wait, what? And you have to go digest it for months, if not years. And you have to experience it in real time years later to be like, wow, that was so powerful. So I'm going to drop it to you. But worrying for false protection, what that ultimately means is that you think you can prepare yourself from feeling horrible things if you just anticipate it ahead of time, when the reality is you're only setting yourself up to feel the pain twice. I'm going to repeat that. You think that by worrying and having all of this preparedness for what you might feel when the tragedy happens or when the bad thing happens or when whatever you anticipate happening. Like you think that that worry is serving you so that you won't have to feel the emotions, when the reality is you are only actually preparing yourself to feel it twice. So you're essentially torturing yourself longer than you have to. What your brain has done subconsciously is try to predict and control the future, which means that you're already living in those emotions as if you're there, but you haven't experienced any of it yet. Not really. So when it does happen, guess what? You have to now experience it twice. You have to experience it longer than you would if you just allowed yourself to be in the present moment and allowed yourself the trust of managing it when it happens in the moment. Again, this was something that I heard in the moment and had to digest for weeks, if not months, if not years, because it was so profound. And I think about this every single time there is something in my life that is causing me a lot of anxiety. When there's worry in my head about someone or something, about some sort of future event, about what could happen or what might happen, what I bring myself back to gain control back over my life is that those things have not yet happened. I don't need to spend energy there. I don't need to allow those emotions to control me and to, take so much power away from me twice. I don't need to live in those emotions longer than necessary. I don't even want those emotions. I don't even like them, right? And so what I ultimately walked away from in that retreat was realizing I had made myself experience grief for months before I actually experienced the grief. And my Opa actually passed away. I think it was almost exactly 2 weeks after I got back from that retreat. He passed away. And I remember it really hitting home because everything that my coach had said made sense all of a sudden. It was like, oh, I see now. I'm experiencing all of this grief and this pain and this emptiness and the sadness and just despair. Like I'm experiencing all of it. And I made myself go through it a whole month or more before I actually had to, which only made the intensity that much more deep. And not to mention that what it highlighted for me was that there was no actual need to prepare myself for that grief, because the grief was going to be there and it was going to feel bad whether I prepared myself for it or not. Because this is the thing about worrying for false protection. This is what it means by false protection. You think the worry is going to help you feel the feelings with less pain when they come. But it doesn't. It only creates the experience of you experiencing it longer and deeper and twice. Okay? So I want you to think about that when you feel like an anxious Nelly, when you feel like you're worrying, when you're anticipating something, that's optional. And it really took coaching for me to realize that's optional. I don't actually have to live this way. So when a lot of that worry comes up for me to this day, what do? I notice it. I notice the anxiety. I notice the worry. And I just thank my brain for trying its best to protect me, because that's what it thinks it's doing. It's like, hey, if we go ahead and think about this now and worry about this now and overthink about it and prepare for it, then it won't hurt by the time we get to it. That's what your brain thinks. That's why the anxiety is there. That's why the worry is there. That's why the overthinking is there. It thinks it's serving you. It thinks that it is preparing you to keep from feeling horrendous, uncomfortable emotions when the thing, whatever the thing is, happens, or maybe never happens. But it thinks that what you're doing is that you're going to get to avoid what feels so terrible. And I just want to let you know that when you allow your brain to engage in that and you don't interrupt it and you don't just think it and say, hey, thanks for trying to protect me, but I see what you're trying to do. And guess what? The reality is, if that happens or when that happens, I'm going to have to feel it. And I would rather not feel it days, weeks, months, or years before the thing actually happens. Thank you so much, brain. But I don't want to live in this torture twice or twice as long. Because the reality is, you can look at the current results in your life and many times realize, hasn't even happened yet. Hasn't happened. Okay? My brain's just trying to prepare me for what if it does. But if you look at the reality, it hasn't occurred. So I don't need to allow the energy to go there to prepare me for something that I don't have to experience actually until it happens, if it happens. Because it's just a real waste of energy, and it takes so much more emotional toil on your body. It releases so much more cortisol than you want. And you don't want your body living in a constant state of high cortisol. Cortisol is your stress hormone. The more that stress hormone is releasing, the more you literally prime your body for disease. High cortisol actually changes your gene expression and makes you susceptible to illnesses and ailments and autoimmune and cancers and all of this stuff, because the equivalent of your stress hormone being released over and over and over again is like keeping your Christmas tree plugged in with the lights on all year long and never turning them off. Eventually, those fuses, right, are going to burn out. And ideally, you don't want them to burn out. You don't want different portions of that tree, aka your body, to burn out. Okay? So I just want you to think about this and be able to have the awareness so that when you notice that this is happening for you, you can do your best to calm your nervous system as much as possible and bring yourself back into the present moment. Ground yourself in the present moment as much as you can. I know it's difficult. Breathe through it. And if you need to, get the support, get the therapist, get the coach, get help with whatever it is that you're struggling with or that you're worrying about. Really get in there with what your mind is offering, because it's optional. This is optional. You don't have to live in it. And I can't tell you how that coaching on that weekend actually transformed my life. I worry a lot less. Now, my brain does have a lot of worst case scenario. So I am still learning how to relieve my nervous system of worst case scenario brain, like going to the worst thing before it goes to the best thing. That's been really hard coming from, a life full of different traumatic events. However, when my anxiety and my worry are showing up to try and falsely protect me, I'm able to catch it. I'm able to notice it. I'm able to thank my brain for trying to be so protective and trying to prepare me to not feel any emotions that feel like trash. However, I have to remind my brain that when those emotions come, I am emotionally intelligent enough and emotionally mature enough that I will get through it. And that is because I've been doing a lot of work on myself for 8 years. The more that you work on your emotional capacity, your emotional resilience, your emotional maturity, aka your emotional intelligence, the less you will have to spend your time in the past, and the less you will have to spend time in the future. You will be able to be a more present person in your life because you're not going to be constantly worried about emotions you might feel. You'll just be able to handle those emotions as they come. Okay? I hope this episode helps you. And if you need any support, remember you can always schedule a free consult on MacyRenee.com. Okay? We'll talk about what you have going on, where you want to be, why you're not there, what may help you in coaching and what I can offer. And if it sounds good and it feels good, we'll move forward. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. And if there's somebody I can refer you to based on what you're looking for, I will do that as well. I just want you to be able to get any of the help that you need for you. All right? All right. Have a great week, you guys. I will see you next week. Bye. Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of This Is Not Your Practice Life podcast. If you'd like to connect on social media, you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook at Macy Renee Coaching. And if you want to stay up to date on all of my offers, announcements, and inspirational emails, you can join my email list at macyrenee.com. In addition, if there's a way that I can further support you in your coaching journey, you can schedule a free 60-minute consult at macyrenee.com anytime you want so we can discuss the best options for you. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.